Mudi Yahaya is considered one of the leading contemporary artists from Nigeria. He came recently to Brazil, to the city of Salvador, Bahia, where he presented his new exhibition, Reverberações, reflecting the African impressions of memory, in which he worked extensively with his photographic archive collected through more than 20 years of traveling through regions of Nigeria and West Africa. Combined with his deep knowledge, the exhibition gives us insights into the complexity of African global cultures and identities. Mudi's work extends beyond photography, for he's also a filmmaker, archivist, Afromusophile, writer, and curator. He very generously made himself available for this interview, in which we discuss the role and power of photography in exploring truth, how territorial migration impacts identity, some African conceptions of Brazil, as well as possibilities for the future of photography.
A particular exhibition I had in 2010 at a space called CCA in Lagos comes to mind. It was my first solo exhibition at CCA, and it was about binaries and hybridization, and basically binaries on all levels, sexual binaries, violence, things. So it was an exhibition called The Ruptured Landscape, and it spoke about things that we are used to and things that we assume we're used to, or things that our minds fit in. So the first thing was that most of my subject matter were not wearing clothes, and they had different things on them. Some of them had scars, and there was this particular gentleman. He was topless, he wasn't naked, and he had a scar. I got him wearing gingham trousers with white, red, and blue, checked. Big guy, big beard, knife with blood dripping down. And the first reaction by the audience was that he was a Muslim, probably a terrorist, and it was violence. And it made me smile. So then I had another image of two guys that had come to model for me, and they had seen on the table a maple top book. If you know photography, maple top was gay, and he had models that were, he was putting also binaries, black white binaries, black models, white models, alabaster, busts, Roman figures. So the two guys said, oh, they could pose for me, and I said, this is weird because I'd never known Nigerian. So I said, oh, we'll go into the other room. When I came in, they were doing different things, holding hands. So I took pictures and I just shot it, but they were naked. And because there were several female photographs, bare-chested female photographs, everybody looked at this image, saw that these were male, but their mind said no, and they moved on. But they were saying, why did I shoot female breast? Why? This is really bad. But they look at this image and then they move. So because in Nigeria, homosexuality is banned, their minds rejected what they saw. They said, this cannot be. Two men, no, they didn't see that. And they always moved. But and I put the pictures in different ways because it was just a bit of like my own experiment about what you reject with your mind and what you say yes or no. Yeah. So they had, and then so there was a girl with with a figure that many people liked, male and female. The men came out and kept on asking me that, so how did you get this girl to do this? And the females were like, could you give me an address? But everybody was like, generally, why did you make a picture? But everybody was listening to me. So you could see that people want to see what they want to see. And people see what they also aspire to see in images, and reject what they don't want to see, even if you put it right in front of them. So this was an experience, and it taught me a lot about perception. It taught me a lot about dogma, and it taught me a lot about ideology and how it frames our world viewpoints. just like, as I said, in cinema, you would have juxtapositioning, the famous montage, a person with a knife, a person sitting down, but you keep playing with it, then next thing it suggests this person wants to use this. And that is also done in how you also hang and mount photographs in an exhibition.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting, and it interests me a lot about this aspect that you were talking about. People see what they want to see. I'm just curious about like what are the ways that people like end up seeing maybe what the truth is, because we have this resistance to truth. I mean, people, they say they seek truth and they're looking for it somewhere distant, but sometimes truth is like near their face, but they don't see it. So I'm realizing that sometimes the capacity to see truth, the capacity to apply justice has to do with someone's own willingness to accept honesty and a courage to do so. So I was wondering, because you work with different mediums, not only photography, but also like you give speeches and you have texts and cinema, you know, many stuff. So like each language has an effect, but when we are like when we want to maybe bring an aspect of reality to be more clear, like from your experience, what have been means that have been more effective? What can you achieve with one means? And because I also think that, for example, photography has a great potential in many ways, but it has great limitations, as you were saying. Like you can put a big photograph on someone's face, but like the medium itself has some limitation when it comes to maybe people's willingness to look at these images. But maybe if you had another medium that was not photography, maybe you could achieve something closer to this person's willingness to relate themselves to the image and the people that are represented in the image. So maybe like just giving a little bit of context, but thinking about what is the language that you think has more powerful effect in making people courageous to face the truth. When we see like the capacity to understand truth as something to develop, and maybe bravery as an aspect of it, and like what are the ways we can introduce this?
I'll start with two things. The written word is a very powerful device, instrument of persuasion. If you remember the Second World War, when the Nazis came, what did they first do? They got the Jews and burnt their books. Because they realized that in books lie immutable truth, or verifiable truth, or truth that can be examined, truth that can be used, weaponized, demonized, whatever. Then you put that next to the idea that a picture is more than 1,000 words. So you have text, and you have this thing where a picture is more than 1,000 words. So I realized after a while that it was important in my practice to juxtapose jarring pictures, like as I said in the binaries. So you put type A truth, type B truth, and put a text. They might read the text. But eventually I started speaking up, where I would sort of give a compass, and either way, with the compass I give you and the text and the two images, you would come to your own truth. But in most times it would lead you somewhere that you didn't expect. Because as I told you, books, text, immutable truth, images don't lie, or they can lie. As we know, the camera lies. But then you put two images, two ironic differences of the same thing, and say it's either the cup is half full or the cup is half empty, depending on what perspective you want to see. And that tells us, you know, it wakes you up when someone tells you that you see the cup as half full or half empty. It speaks directly to prejudice or preconceived positions, you understand? Then you say, these are the facts. And in case you don't know, these are other facts. And once you listen, once you read, once you see something, you can dismiss it, but in your subconscious, it festers and it starts to irritate you. And you have to come to terms with what conclusions you have been able to filter out through the evidence you have. So I say things, as I told you, the speech was, you could either say, it depends, again, language. It could have been a speech or it could have been a lecture. So if I use the opportunity to give a speech and make it a lecture and make sure that the text is available online, anything that irritated a person, interested the person can go back to the text to examine, but the images are still there. And then the images stay in your mind, you looked at it and you see these things, you would have to re-examine and change your position. It has been a method I've used in my practice. So the idea of speaking or giving a lecture, that many times people can't connect directly at first instance to the photographs, has worked because eventually they can start seeing what it is. If you say slavery and you are very literal and you put chains, whips, it's not really that, because there are many layers to a definition. So you need to explore and ventilate these ideas so that people see what agency is within these images, you understand? So I don't know if this helps, but this is the approach I use.
Yeah, no, that was really useful, really helpful too.
So the average Nigerian has an allegiance to Brazil that you are born with. We just feel there's a connection. All Nigerians support Brazil in football. We were not very good initially in football, so the only team we had was Brazil. And I remember in the 80s, a match where Brazil did well to the semi-finals before Italy took them out. I cried for days, and I was not the only one crying. Many people cried. So we see Brazil as part of who we are. Every Nigerian is first, it's without saying, you're a supporter of the Brazilian team. Without saying. We follow it, the allegiance is there. Pele came to Nigeria during the Civil War. For some days, the Civil War sort of cooled down because Pele was around. People don't realize this fact, that Pele came to Nigeria and people were like, okay, we're doing Civil War, well, hold on, Pele is around. So you can see the effects or the magnetism that the word Brazil does in Nigeria. The slavery story, we have the connection, but Africans see slavery definitely differently from what people in diaspora see slavery, because the meta-narrative here is that we are the ones that committed the original sin, we sold our brothers, and the people in diaspora are in perpetual problems. But slavery never left Africa. We suffer greatly and deeply from slavery. The consequences are almost on a daily basis, but it depends on if you care to check and trace where these relationships are. Many of us would say the blacks in diaspora have a better chance in the world than us. So when they complain, we say, well, just test it. With your Brazilian passport, how many places can you go in the world, and how many places do we go? With the Nigerian passport, you are always sidelined and checked specially. So we are humiliated on a constant basis. We are stereotyped. Every Nigerian is a crook, a fraudulent guy. And it's hard to understand that people that know that you can't use one person and his bad behavior, misdemeanor to categorize a whole generation, a whole country. But it's done to us. So coming here, you see a sort of romantic interest. The first thing is, can you speak Yoruba? They speak our Orishas. They mumble a few Yoruba words. There are over 200 and something languages in Nigeria. You don't have only Yoruba. Yoruba came with the slave trade here, but as you know, when Salvador, the Malay revolt was led by Hausa slaves from northern Nigeria. not only Hausa, Nupe slaves from the middle belt part of Nigeria and some Yorubas. But the meta-narrative here is always Yoruba. No, but they were Nupes. In fact, the people that led it were all from the north, and they were Muslims. So you start wondering, is there a selective memory? Is this so romantic? Because, and in a sense, you know, everyone is scared of the unknown. So I think I perceive a fear of the unknown here to dig deep and find things that might shock people. So I noticed that very few people ask me questions. And I've wondered, why don't they ask me questions? But I've come to the conclusion that it's from a fear of the unknown. I've learned how to be still and balanced now. I don't want anything to shake my equilibrium. I don't want anything to just make me get confused here. So just, you know, okay, you know, we do a bit of, you know, I share and we stop there. But you don't learn in that way, you know. So the way to do it is to open your mind and learn more. You might be shocked that it's more therapeutic. But so that's the feeling I hear, that because we were at the speech, no one asked me a question. You're there. I said my bits, nobody said, ask me a question. There are some questions that I think are very difficult for Brazilians to answer when it comes to slavery, or it comes to how they've taken, how it's happened to the Afro-Brazilians. And there's a particular question I ask many people, and they can't answer it, they even forget about answering it. Which tells me that, yeah, okay, there's this fear of the unknown. It's a very fragile sort of memory or experience, and we've kept it just floating. We don't want to shake it. But that can't be progressive. Yeah. So how do you start? You have to, you know, take it, the good and the bad. And it's not all bad. Because as I said, you know, the example I've been given here to sort of illustrate the impact of what I'm saying is that you have a family, and I've repeated it several times, you have a family and the father of the family is taken and all the sons are taken. And these are the people that were the breadwinners, they were the ones in the farms, they're the ones, you know, bringing food home. What do you think happens to that family? So let's say you have young daughters, no daddy, no brothers, they are more exposed to all kinds of things. It would be a miracle if they don't eat very well after a long while, that they go into, you know, the streets. So you can imagine that on a large scale that happened in Africa. So a lot of families were destroyed by the slave trade, and are still destroyed. There's a town in northeastern Nigeria called Calabar. In Calabar, the women are the landlords. The women are in charge of running things by their culture. One can imagine how that happened, because that was also an area where the slave trade happened. So over centuries, you just say, oh, this is what we do in Calabar, the women are the landlords. But obviously there was an absence, something happened. You know, the devastation of the landscape, the environment, because when people realize there's danger in a space, everybody abandons the space, because if we are caught here, they'll take you. So these places were abandoned, people pillaged those places, stripped them of any natural resources. It's amazing when you go to where the slave trade was a big activity. You'll be very sad to see the state of affairs into such places. I'm talking about the Niger Delta. Till today, it produces majority of a big percentage of the revenue for the country, but it has always been there. It's been this triangle of first palm oil, what is called dende here, slaves, and then people. I mean, it's like a triangle. So it's always produced, you know, this impact. So one wonders and one feels a bit, I would say disappointed, but you should, like, you know, made the expressions, come on. Yeah, my brother, why? So you want to talk to me, but you're stopping. You know, why? Embrace me, I want to embrace you. You know, so it's a bit of that here. I've been into different parts of Brazil. I've visited the major cities, Rio, Sao Paulo. A lot of people don't even know about Nigeria, and it's shocking to me. So someone is sitting in front of me and telling me, oh, this is my religion, this is Eshu, Yemoja, Ogun, and that this is our religion. So I said, yeah, but it came from us. No, this is our religion. It's here. And I said, what language? They say Yoruba. I said, where's Yoruba from? They say Africa. I said, where in Africa? They say, no, Africa. I said, it's Nigeria. Where's Nigeria? Then you get really shocked. You get really shocked because it's really Nigeria. It's not Angola. Now, a lot of Afro-Brazilians can trace their roots back to Angola, but it's phenomenal to realize that the major culture that is held on to is Yoruba culture, Nigerian culture. So we're relevant. So, and they don't know where Africa is. There was one fisherman in Recife that once said, oh, if you go on the ocean directly, you get to Nigeria. I was so impressed, but most people didn't know, oh, where is it? Oh, Africa, that's it. So to come to Brazil and you start thinking that the average person thinks Africa is a country. So it tells you about other things, that there's a problem with the educational system when it comes to Afro-Brazilians. It tells you that there's some imbalance in terms of literacy. It tells you that there are other problems here that can be traced to slavery too. And then you become more patient when you understand that, because how come they don't know? So that means there's something in the educational system. Then you find out that black history is not taught, indigenous history is not taught. They don't really know about Africa. So there must be an intent, what do you call it? What's the word? Intentional approach towards embracing Africa.
Yeah.
Okay, I would say Wole Soyinka came here recently, and what was his message? He says, come back. He kept on saying, come back. So if you take that statement, on the surface, it looks like, oh, just come back to the back. But it's reconnect with your spiritual being. Come back to the source. So we say it in many ways. When you get back to Africa, you yourself would find there's nowhere like home. Once you go back and everybody says, oh, this is our brother, the freedom also transfers to you. You can never be freer. So there's that. It's something I would suggest to people try and see. And then, it's always a personal experience. It's not one experience that I can say would happen to me and then will happen to you. But I know that the overall thing will be like, wow, I'm back at home. And then, depending on what you want to investigate, you would realize you're back at home. Yes.
That's nice.
So if you try and say, let's remove the dirty word slavery out of the talk, and you start saying, what was that whole thing about? First, it was mass movement of human beings, real big mass movement of human beings for one space to another. Then you ask, what triggered this? Without any emotion, a demand for labor. Because in Brazil, they started off, we want to do these plantations. They grabbed the white man. He didn't do very well with the weather. It wasn't very good. They got the Indian. He didn't do well with the weather. Then they experimented with the black person. And then we got this thing called slavery. So if we pause and imagine the white man had done it very well, they would have not moved to the Indians, and certainly not to the black people. So that is something people should consider. And it now points to something else, that certainly economics, labor is a critical part of all this. And then you now look again, where are we now globally? We're in another situation where you have an aging European population, an unwillingness to have children, and no matter what artificial intelligence does, you have to have human beings managing certain things. So there's a demand, even to look after the old people in the West. There's a demand. So we are getting back to that situation where there must be mass migration again. You could say, now bring back mass migration. If we say mass migration is equal to slavery, then we're getting back into a slave situation where now we negotiate. in those days became and negotiated with bulls, negotiated with cloth, negotiated with clothes and all kinds of things. Now it's a different kind of negotiation. How am I allowing your people to come here, and what are the conditions? So you have to look at labor, you have to look at migration and migrational patterns and how this evolves and where people go. The spiritual part of it is that when you move a person from a place, it triggers two things. It triggers a sense of belonging and a sense of roots. So another thing I see here is this phenomenon of roots and belonging, where identity, the big identity question here, consciously or unconsciously, is a matter of roots and belonging. I belong to Brazil, and my roots are in Africa. A lot of people believe that roots and belonging should be the same thing. Oh, and this ties in a lot to religion as well. So if my spirituality is in Africa, then I'm African. But it's cool, it's okay to be Brazilian, you belong here, but yeah, that. But a lot of people feel that's not right. I belong in Germany, the society I understand, I'm German. I have the privilege to say I belong to Africa and I'm African. But there are new kinds of identities where you could belong somewhere else, but your roots are somewhere else. And you should not feel any hesitance or any awkwardness about this, and these sort of hybrid identities are going to become more plural. Because when you move, migration makes you change, socialize in a different way, and so migration creates a certain type of identity. Mass movement creates two things. It also creates a diaspora, and it creates an exile existence. So some people are in diaspora, have moved. Some people see themselves on exile. I've been here for 100 years, but I don't feel part of the society. Now you can see the belonging and roots. So to them, I've been here on exile for 100 years. And some people feel I've migrated to Brazil. So I've traumatized with the society, I've done everything, I'm Brazilian. And I don't want to see this African part again, I've shifted. But then a lot of people are here on exile. And exile doesn't mean 2 months, 3 months, it could be a month, it could be 1 year, 100 years. You're on exile 100 years, and this affects your identity. So you have to examine, these things. What is exile? What does diaspora mean? What does migration mean? Where am I in the conversation of belonging and roots? You have to think about these things. So many people don't think about these things, and then it becomes problematic because you've never thought about this idea of where do I belong and what are my roots. And there'll be more of that as time goes on. And more people, you are similar to this, you understand? And in my own way, I'm similar to this. And in a society here where everything is mixed, this whole idea of racial democracy that Brazil tried to do, that it's sort of like a bit of a myth, you understand, has categorized, has brought in new dimensions of colorism. Colorism is, I think, one of the worst aspects of racism, you understand? Because when you start looking at a person at the color, and the color gives you social mobility, there's a problem. And you have something like that in Angola as well. We don't have that in most of Africa, but Angola is very, very similar to Brazil.
Which one you think came first, Brazil or Angola in this sense? Does one influence the other?
It's a very complex relationship. I will be crucified to say what I'm going to say now, but I would say it. The average Angolan doesn't see themselves really as African because their aspiration is to come to Brazil. All Angolas I ever hear this, I have my head, but this is the perception when I went to Angola, this is what it is. So you have a lot of categories of black. In Angola it's weird because in Angola, in the rest of Africa, everybody likes the mixed race person. It's an exotic association. Oh, she's mixed race. In Angola, it was the first time in my life where I realized that black was the highest hierarchy. So the mixed race person is subjugated in Angola. In other parts of Africa, you're not really subjugated, but you're celebrated in a sense. But in Angola, the blacker you are, the bigger you are. So So of course, naturally, where would the population want to go? To a place where they have a better chance? Maybe Brazil, because in Brazil, everybody is sort of a bit of a mixture. So you can understand why the aspiration is to go to Brazil.
So they can be like the blackest person?
No, well, they can exist. They are categories, but that they can associate with. But in Angola, where they say, oh, if you're not black, then okay, you're something else. So if you're black, you're cool. And the majority, and they have also a range. So of course they want to go to Brazil where there are many people similar to them in color. So this is really bad thing about slavery and colorism, In most of Africa, it's not that the same way, But this is not good. To link social mobility to color is not a good thing. I think everyone has to look at, what ideology controls them. Are you a capitalist? Are you a socialist, communist, Democrat? How that works with you? Because these things, including religion, gives us our world viewpoint. Then there are other things that are constantly manipulating us. Data. As I said in the speech, the color of data is a very big thing. For photography, it's like a new threshold because the future of photography is at the intersection of machine learning, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, and virtual reality. So the big things, or where photography is moving to, is going to, is playing directly with the truth. Let's say things like the deep fakes. Even the word tells you deep fake. But then we can't escape the fact that augmented reality now affects photography. You have people now having on prints, you have layers of animation videos on prints in exhibitions, interactive spaces, three-dimensional videos. You have data-driven documentaries where algorithms search for patterns in metadata of photographs to tell you where the trends are, where the patterns are, what you should focus on. So when you have data doing that sort of thing and telling you that this is where the trend is, you now come back to that question of how does structured ideology, racism, impact on algorithms that affect our world? Because anywhere you go, everybody has a black screen. The black screen is the phone. And the phone, in a day, the average person is bombarded with so many images you can't imagine. So from when you wake up, you see a small video, a YouTube video, WhatsApp file. You'll be shocked how many videos you've seen since you woke up this morning. So the new literacy is still moving images. So for photography, it's a very big responsibility, because now photography is going into the realm of ideology, going into the realm of structural racism, it's going into the realm of philosophy. So there must be a philosophical approach towards how you understand still and moving images.